You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Hello and welcome to the penultimate episode of Reaction Chat, brought to you by those lovely folk over at fanthatracks.com. So this is our little ruminations about episode 8, The Real Good Guys. As always, this is your spoiler reminder. So if you haven't seen episode 8, the finale of Skeleton Crew, then stop what you're doing, watch it, come back, and then you can join in the fun without being spoiled. So if you remember, and hopefully you do, last week, we were left on a bit of a cliffhanger. We had a face-off on the walkway outside the vault of 1139 on At-Atin. The kids made it home in more or less one piece. Jod had managed to con his way through the security gates and is now acting as a Republic emissary.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
So Marky boy, thoughts on this episode? Good, bad, indifferent?
None of the above, apart from good. Very, very good. It's difficult, I think, to stick the landing on a Star Wars show, any Star Wars show, or a film, because there's usually so much going on, so much to tie up. And one of the things that we've mentioned more than once on this show, or this season of Reaction Crew, as it's been renamed, is that they've set things up very much to the delight of old wrestling fans like us. We've had the payoff. And this episode, something that was set up 4 or 5 episodes ago, came back into play, albeit on a different world, but very similar, and gave us a payoff. And I'm talking about the gun that Neil uses. And there was just things like that all the way through it, just little moments, little callbacks, you know, win with a lightsaber, and just loads of little bits that really played nicely into making this a really satisfying conclusion. And I say conclusion because, I mean, you mentioned we've got a wash-up episode to do to look back at the season later on. But, you know, in terms of what we saw, it brought to resolution everything that we've seen so far. All the kids had a moment. All the kids had a purpose, importantly. Wim's dad turns out to be not the starchy, stiff-coloured authoritarian that we maybe thought he was. Because you've got to think that he was a kid just like Wim when he was 10. He'd have been out on his little scooter whizzing around At-Atin. So he's just never had the experience that Wim and the other kids have had leaving the planet. There's so many great moments. I know we're going to get into all of it, but yeah, I was thrilled with it. I thought it was fantastic. I can't think of a better way, actually, that they could have wrapped it up and delivered what they did. I thought they did a spectacular job. What about yourself?
I happen to completely agree with you, which makes for a really rubbish kind of podcast. However, I think there was no major surprises, I think, for like the observant viewer. I think you could pretty much have, you know, a bingo card and guess where things are probably going to go for the most part and who was going to be in it. However, that doesn't matter because it was just an enjoyable episode. And actually, it felt like one of the longer episodes in the series. I do like the fact that actually the parents weren't completely relegated to the sidelines, and actually most of them kind of got involved, or half of them got involved. You know, as soon as you can land back on the planet and that there's a risk that the kids suddenly become overpowered because of their experiences out in the galaxy. And yes, they took charge and got stuff done, but also I think the parents were also trying to kind of like sort stuff out as well. So I thought that was really good. Let's not beat around the bush. I mean, some gratuitous and quite shocking Neil bath scenes in this episode. I mean, what more could you want?
It was pretty full on. It was. It wasn't the sort of content I would expect from a family-friendly Disney Plus show. If you've got the trunk, I mean, that's two bad scenes we've had now, isn't it?
Yeah.
But they layered it in the sense that, you know, they're back home. Jod, you know, acting as the emissary, has sort of said, right, send everybody home. I want droids watching them. They're playing along respectfully, and we learn out later why. To a T, they all go back. They've all got the droids with them. And it's lovely that Neil who we know is the kind of kid who gets in and his mom's running a bath, his brothers and sisters playing around, that he's back in the bath just like he was in that first episode. So I love that. Yeah, it was gratuitous though. But just to get them back into their regular place, it reminded me a little bit, and it's not the same. They've not gone to Mordor, but there was an element of Bilbo coming home and thinking, I can't stay because I've sinned too much. And there was Wim was a little bit, it's not remotely the same level of what they've been through. But he's the only one. Those 3-4 kids are the only ones that have been out into the galaxy in this entire planetary generation, as far as we know. We now know that the supervisor's an AI, and Stephen Fry doesn't turn up, but was very welcome to hear his voice. So that gives them, like you mentioned, the parents, they don't overpower, but they do kind of, I mean, those kids have grown up in many, many ways. They do kind of defer to the kids, especially, I think, when Fern is with her mom, you know, and her mom's really thrown off by everything. You know, she knows what the Wizard of Oz is. She understands that the supervisor is what the supervisor is. And when Jod does what he does with the saber and takes him out, you know, she's completely bamboozled. And it's only Fern being a tough little cookie, but actually now mega streetwise compared to what she was, that gets them through the whole experience.
That whole opening 10 minutes or 15 minutes, really, until we get into a supervisor and Jod does take him down. That, you know, there was some level of frustration from the viewer because, like you know, the kids know, but yeah, they haven't really had the opportunity because these security guards to kind of just say, "Hey, this dude's, you know, really not who he says he is." You know, because you can see all the frustration on the kids when they first meet parents and stuff. You know, when they're all stood there and told to go back to their bedrooms. I think it just speaks to how well Jod played that situation and played the circumstances he finds him in. He's really clever, like that grifter aspect of being able to just pull the wool over people's eyes. But also, I suppose he's got just a little bit of enough knowledge about Jedi terminology that he can kind of just slide some of that in to make that performance even more believable.
But it was brilliant the way it worked. He could never have known what the supervisor knew. He pushes the limits of what he knows. He can dismiss what the kids are saying because the kids don't know. They only know what they've seen in the last few weeks, until the point when the supervisor says, well, that's strange. The last message we got was treat all the Jedi as traitors. So what are you, a traitor or a liar, sort of thing? And that was like, that moment was, you know, in The Lion King when Scar realizes he's screwed and he see the look at his face, it was that kind of feel.
And that was, I thought that was really clever. You know, at that point, you kind of almost assume that he's just going to be able to just lie his way around the supervisor because it's a machine and it's dumb. But actually, you know, it's kind of going, well, hang on a sec, this doesn't compute. You go in there and that supervisor's office clearly hasn't been inhabited by any person for either that or no cleaning droid for several years. So you wonder, like, how many people have seen the supervisor? Like Fern's mum was like, oh, you get to see the supervisor. So she's clearly must have met him. But you wonder how many people from the population even know that, it's a machine.
You wonder as well, if there's a supervisor on At-Atin, there would be supervisors on the other planets.
Absolutely.
And it's part of the great work, and that gets mentioned. The great work, was it the same thing on every planet? Was every planet a gold mine like At-Atin is, or did they do different things? But nevertheless, whatever it was for, as part of the great work, At-Atin, we saw, had fallen into warfare. So you think their supervisor, AI or whatever you want to call it, had probably failed, and there was nobody running that. But we learned a lot on that world, specifically Neil, who actually mentions that episode and then uses the weapon from it. But just as that whole thing played out, just as Jod realizes he's caught out, he's played his hand now, so his only option is to use the lightsaber to try and strong arm his way through. But that's kind of where the kids come into their own, because they've seen him do this before.
Exactly. I mean, they're scared of him, but they're not like scared of him. Like, they're not, you know, frozen in fear.
And he never lays a hand on them, does he? That's what he said. It's not like he slaps them or hits them or anything.
Exactly. I suppose you could say he's kind of slightly respectful of the fact that they are still kids, as much as they annoy the hell out of him, as per like last week. Yeah, I mean, other really than Wim's dad, he doesn't get violent really on any of the people from the planet.
And it was Wim's dad that went in on him, don't forget. Wim's dad was the one that punched him. So
he sucker punched him, yeah. You know, I was quite surprised. But I think, like, even said, didn't I? Like, even I think in the second episode where you see him sat down at the sofa, like, he wasn't just going to sit back and accept the state of affairs and that. So the fact that he did that and jumped on the speeder bikes with him and that, which was kind of cool.
That whole scene.
Yeah.
And that whole thing with the kids going to the housing estate on their bikes was just the end of E.T. leading them back to the forest so E.T. can go home. I know it's a different scenario, but just that vibe of that moment was brilliant. But in E.T., you didn't have E.T.'s mom riding the bike with you. You know, in this, you got Wendell's with Wim, and they're going for it, and he's part of the skeleton crew, isn't he?
Pretty much, yeah. You know, he's a level 7 engineer.
Oh,
it was.
what a scene!
Yeah.
What a scene!
Hello, this is Mark Thompson. I narrate a bunch of the Star Wars audiobooks, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Do or do not. There is no try.
That's the clever thing about this is that, you know, they've tried to kind of one up, the adults on some episodes, but it's not every single episode.
No.
That whole bike scene, I mean, I was just like, well, look, if this becomes a really popular show and stuff like that, that's like a Disney park ride waiting to happen, isn't it?
Completely.
Really? I mean,
or a game or an app or anything.
It's something like that. There's one message in this that actually I think Fern said. Yeah, it was Fern said. As the pirates are kind of landing, they've kind of come through the barrier and stuff, and she's talking to her mum, and she says, we've been to some really crappy hellholes, but in every single place, there's been at least one person who's good. And actually, that is a really good message. Actually, at the time, I was like, oh yeah, that's actually really true. That's something that you can follow through and look back on it for the season. Because actually, there has been, even down to like Pirate Hideout, you had that waitress girl or something,
That's right.
Helped them and stuff. Yeah, okay. The galaxy's a big, dangerous place, but there are good folk out there.
I did notice that quite a few people on socials this afternoon were sort of pointing that line out.
Yeah.
And just casting their mind back to, the moment in Phantom Menace where Jira helps them, you've got to get out the storm, Annie, and it's just basically a strange, Man, that's uncanny. And just little moments you can go through all the TV stuff and the animated stuff. And like you say, you'll find people who will just go out their way just because. In a galaxy that, as the kids say, if they hadn't have had those little moments, if they hadn't have come across Kim, for example, who is basically the Mazkanata of this series, isn't she? She's totally helped them out. And it was great, again, talking about things paying off. As they leave the moon, and I think it was episode 3, and she sort of pulls KB back and says, if you need me, just give me a call. And clearly there was some communication where she gives her a data card or some way of communicating her.
Yeah.
And KB does. And that played off beautifully. And just getting the Onyx Cinder just out of the atmosphere enough to send that message, and then back down they come. And obviously it was a hard landing, but all of it, the way it was played, the visuals in this whole episode were fantastic. And we saw so much of At-Atin as well.
We haven't really seen a huge amount of it. And when we were on Akron, it was obviously leveled pretty much. But then also, I think it was quite surprising how, not really surprised when you think about it, but like the pirates, as they land and stuff, they're just blowing stuff up. I mean, for the sheer hell of it. Other than that turbo laser that's been hidden, there's no real defense of any kind really on that planet. You kind of think, wow, okay, so you're putting all your stock in this protective energy barrier, which is of course pretty cool and probably would keep out, most of them. But then if something does slip through, only one turbo laser is not a great deal of defense, really, is it, for a whole planet?
No, we just consider that, like we always do. Oh, it's Coruscant, but actually, okay, Coruscant's a city planet, but there's specific places you go, but we just say Coruscant. But on At-Atin, what's the name of this city? It feels like it's the capital of At-Atin, but are there if there's 1,138 other places that hold the gold, then there must be, you'd think.
Yeah, it can't all be stored there.
No, so there must be other towns or villages or cities or whatever around At-Atin. What defences have they got? Well, maybe that's overthinking it. Because the defences have been so good, and you wonder, did At-Akron have a defence like At-Atin? Did other worlds have systems that kept them hidden? Because now she's completely open. The New Republic's rocked up with a wing of X-Wings and a couple of B-Wings, and there's things that have arrived. So they're now on the New Republic's radar. The message that the supervisor got, the last message was from the Republic, not the High Republic, not the Old Republic. It was the Republic, as Order 66 is kicking off. The consequences and the aftermath of that message, don't trust the Jedi, treat them as traitors, has a direct effect on Jod, because his master, as you would call it, who was going to train him, is taken out by, we don't know, by clone troopers, by Darth Vader, by the Inquisitors, we don't know. There might be a Marvel series.
I say come into a Marvel one shot probably near you, I think.
So there's lots of questions now. It's like, At-Atin now, this gold store, this phenomenally wealthy, important planet now, all of a sudden it's gone from being hidden from the view of the galaxy to all of a sudden any pirate, anybody who fancies an easy mark, until they put defences around it, that's an easy place to attack. Okay, how quick's the word going to get out? we see the pirate ship go down and crash. God knows how many people got killed when they blew that thing over a populated area. That wasn't well thought through, but it looked good. So they're down and out. You don't think that any escaped. We know Jod survives. He ends his scenes in the show almost with a wry smile on his face, which I liked actually, because we've watched all this stuff with the kids, and he was a kid. We know a little bit about his childhood now, which we didn't before, and he kind of almost appreciates the fact that these kids, they weren't weak, they weren't pampered, they outsmarted, in his mind, one of the greatest pirates ever. I'm sure he thinks that's what he was.
I know there's been a lot of kind of discussion online about, is he using some kind of like tricks and stuff like magnets and what have you to kind of pull everything, because everything he's kind of attracted to tends to be metal, has been metal. I mean, obviously that's not to say about like if there were a season 2, they couldn't retcon that, and actually it turns out, he's just been BSing all along. The story that he tells felt genuine. From what I could gather anyway, it almost felt like he was found by this Jedi, and I think he was just like some kind of like waif. And then the Jedi's kind of taken him in and has obviously felt a Force connection after Order 66, and then has taken it upon themselves to kind of try and impart some kind of training, and then gets taken out. Probably at that point, I would say it's either going to be Gen 1 Stormtroopers or, Inquisitors.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
If Atatin is this mint, and that's where they're creating the credits, up until that point, they were still having fairly regular deliveries because the Republic is in the middle of a war. So it's going to need a ton of credits because the expenditure of supplying clone troopers with vehicles and stuff is going to be exponentially expensive. But then suddenly, like overnight, did somebody just go, do you know what, and just destroy the records? Or, is that not passed on to like the Imperial government? And then how do they create their own credits? Which we kind of obviously start to then see part of that a little bit in Andor. It has opened up some questions, admittedly not like massive character questions as such. I'm sure somewhere somebody could write a book about it and just mention it, and that will satisfy my desire to find out. But that's good, because actually it's stuff that you can go, well, that's the minutiae of the kind of Star Wars universe that we used to really enjoy, was actually learning about this stuff, and not necessarily from a primary source, but from an expanded universe novel or something like that.
This was a few years ago. It feels like something that would go into one of the West End Game source books.
Yeah, totally.
That kind of detail.
More than a few years ago.
More than a few, yeah. But I take your point in that character-wise, KB and moms have a moment, and women, his dad, have more than a moment, and so does Fern and her mom, and Neil's back at home with his family having a bath. So you've resolved a lot of nice little moments there. So character-wise, you've resolved everything in that
Pretty
sense.
much. You've resolved the conflicts between the parents and the kids. I mean, obviously, you would assume that there'll be a big rebuild. So at that point, you kind of go, right, so there's no supervisor. So what do we do? And then there's a question for the population. It's like, we are no longer part of the Republic. They've got basically to catch up on galactic history. Then it's like, do the population want to do that? Do they want to be included in the New Republic? Do the New Republic make overtures? Will there be some who will actually go, do you know what, let's put the barriers back up. I don't like this black stuff we've seen up there and the shiny lights. I'd much prefer to kind of have our own little, world back. It does create some interesting questions.
It does genuinely make you think. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But I love the thought that Atatin as a society might just say, we haven't got the supervisor in charge of us now. Maybe they go through a whole process of electing leaders, and let's have a referendum. Do we want to join this new republic? Do we know them? What's happened? Why did it happen? These people who were in charge of the Republic, who completely took their eye off the ball, I'm thinking Mon Mothma, who completely took their eye off the ball, and this empire comes in, and now they've been defeated, kind of, and now these people are back in control, and there's just shattered galaxy. We've not seen or know a stitch of this for the last 30-odd years. Do we really want to throw our lot in with these people who are at this very point of time preparing to basically hand their weapons in and demilitarize, thinking that everything's wonderful? We've seen nothing for 30 years, and my God, they've just flattened half the planet.
To my mind, you'd think, just based on what we've seen in the show, like Fern's mum would probably be part of any form of acting council or something. She might run for chancellor or something like that, because I think she's got fairly, lofty aspirations. It's not even really a criticism, because when the show ends, you kind of feel like the story for kids at that point anyway, and then really the other stuff is kind of like, well, if there is a season 2, that could have all happened in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of explainer or a couple of lines here about, oh yeah, mums, you don't have time for me now, mum, because you're running the planet. And
exposition.
Yeah.
Or a scroll up.
Based on how they've done it with the show so far, it would be like a couple of lines here and there that just kind of give you enough of a nugget to know, oh, okay, I kind of get what's happening. Time's passed, the planet's kind of been rebuilt.
But it goes to what you said earlier about, hey, Marvel could do a series about young Jod.
Yeah.
If they did a season 2 of Skeleton Crew, goodness knows, I hope they do. And I hope that the ratings start to pick up and reflect how good this show really is. But that's where Marvel could go, or Lucasfilm could go, right, Marvel, we need a little 2-parter. We're going to show what happened to AT-AT in the years between. We're going to have Fern's mom's going to become a leader to see them into joining the New Republic officially, and then all the other stuff that would happen in that 2-year time period, all the interests of other pirate things, or because all of a sudden AT-AT's going to be like any other planet. I mean, that's a thought. Earth right now, we're giving off sound waves, videos going out, this footage going out. Our footprint in the galaxy gets bigger by the second from Earth. It's going to be the same in the Star Wars galaxy. That shield around AT-AT wouldn't have just blocked them from view. It would have blocked everything as we know it, blocked communications and everything else. Yeah. So as soon as that thing goes down, all of a sudden, anybody in the local area, within a very short space of time comparatively, given they've got sort of hyper signals, they can speak to each other on the other side of the galaxy, literally, they're going to go, what the hell's that over there? Where's that great big green blob that was there last week? Passing ships, they're going to pick it up. They're going to have to put it on astrogation charts because otherwise, all of a sudden, people are going to start smacking into the planet. So there's definitely a story to be told, definitely.
Are all the other 8 planets, have they all been discovered or what have you? Or could some of those still be hidden?
I think they could be hidden. But there's got to be some process. Like I say, any planet, if it causes a gravity, well, it has an effect on hyperspace. So there's got to be some tracking. There's got to be some record. They've got to put it down as, don't go there, it's an asteroid field, when in fact it's a planet. But there's got to be something on charts. So there's something to find. I
wonder if actually AT-AT is on the charts, but it's L9276 gas giant. Because that was the thing, that protective shield was so much larger from the planet.
Enormous, yeah.
And that was probably to really deter and to stop any signals bouncing in and out and all that.
True.
As well as obviously making it a lot harder for a ship to be able to kind of fool all those sentry posts without getting destroyed. It probably is on there, but it's just under a different name. It's just been catalogued as uninhabitable, and not of any interest. That's one of the things that I've been really impressed with how the show has been. Is it's really created a rich environment. Every single planet feels like rich. It feels like there's a history, there's world building going on. And I think this planet could be a good jumping off point for subsequent adventures. With the kids would be great, obviously.
Yeah.
Maybe, like I said, in a couple of years' time, they're a little bit older. Problem is, when they kind of get into that a little bit older kind of territory, you kind of run into the Harry Potter and the Stranger Things kind of issue of he's then has to start really dealing with adolescent hormones and stuff like that. And
yeah. But that'll be interesting. That'll be interesting.
Which, to be fair, we haven't really had a huge amount of that really since probably Jason and Jaina grew up in New Jedi Order. Maybe that second season with slightly older kids might then become more appealing to people who've maybe kind of written this off as just being a Star Wars kids show or a Star Wars show for kids.
If you do that, you bring other dynamics into the show because it can't stay a kids show. And,
no.
And your Potter analogy is perfect because right now, they're a bit too old for Philosopher's Stone. I'd say this is Chamber of Secrets.
Yeah.
And if we come in a couple of years' time, all of a sudden it's Prisoner of Azkaban. And it starts to get interesting. Once you move on from that, they get into the teens and the dynamics change and maybe other people come into it. I'm not shipping Neil and KB, but Neil's already got his eye on some other girl. He's a little player. So you could bring other kids into the group. And that's very much a Stranger Things thing as well.
Exactly.
You have had other characters come into the group, the core group of kids, which has made that a richer show and a more interesting show as it's gone on. So there's a world to develop here. I just think because they've been out there, they've had adventures, they've met people, they've been in some tough situations and they've figured things out. And it's not always with Jod, sometimes with Jod, but not always with Jod.
No.
And just one final thing, I think, as they're leaving, as it's all going down, Wim actually calls out for Jod as the doors of the thing are closing.
Yeah.
So even there's a moment,
You kind of had that, that last shot of Jod, you kind of had that lighting change, didn't you? It kind of got daylight, which kind of, to me, kind of maybe symbolizes that he's not home as such. The grift, as it were, has kind of ended. Whether or not he ends up in prison or at Hatton or gets carted off by the New Republic, you kind of feel like maybe that chapter of his life has closed. Probably he feels like he can kind of move on because actually, yeah, he was right. There was riches there. He wasn't just making it all up. It wasn't just like some BS and stuff. But to your point, and I think a very important point, I am totally going to ship Farah and Wendell. That's my take for season 2.
Totally agree.
But I mean, other than that, yeah, I mean, it would be great to come back, kind of come down to obviously budget and maybe viewing figure expectations. Yeah, I mean, because, okay, so potentially, yes, for viewing figures from what we have read from like Nielsen reports and stuff, hasn't been great. But we don't know what the expectations were from Disney and from Lucasfilm. We don't know if they had high hopes for this. And also, has the Skeleton Crew suffered the same fate as Solo did after the splitting of the fan base with Last Jedi?
Yeah.
Has some of this been a bit of backlash from the Acolyte and people kind of being just turned off by Star Wars streaming shows just in general now? It'd be a shame if it's a casualty of something else, because this show, I think, it stands on its own 2 feet, and I think it's a really strong show.
Completely agree. And it would be criminal, really, if it was the fallout from other stuff. Obviously, Acolyte had a rough ride, but far better viewing figures from what we can tell so far than Skeleton Crew's had. I'll just say this, though. As in terms of marketing, you mentioned Bob Iger said it in his autobiography, if I'm correct, that it was a mistake to release Solo so close to Last Jedi. Not just because there was a negative fallout from Last Jedi that kind of escalated beyond really what the issues were, but it was just too close. People were like, what, another Star Wars film? I saw it a few weeks ago. No, this is another one. It's with Han Solo. Oh, Harrison Ford's back. No, and we know we've been talking about it for years. Crazy times. But I just think now with Skeleton Crew, with the way that it's played out, it's been so beautifully done. The critics have given it great reviews. The fans are giving it great reviews. All round general vibe of Skeleton Crew is very, very positive. And yet, I'll go on Fantha Tracks. We've got a Disney Plus banner on Fantha Tracks. You hit refresh, it brings up an Acolyte banner. It doesn't bring up a Skeleton Crew banner. So there's a definite disconnect in the way that it's been marketed. And I think I said it to you before we started recording. I feel for the guys behind Skeleton Crew the way that I feel for the guys behind Galactic Star Cruiser when 9 out of 10 people out in the population go, oh, you mean the Star Wars hotel? No, it's not a hotel. You sleep there, it's not a hotel. It's not a hotel. And you just want to grab them by the lapels and shake them. Because I was one of the lucky few that did it. It's not a hotel. So Skeleton Crew, it's not a kid show. It's a Star Wars show with kids in it. They're the focal point, but it's not a kid show. And yet you can't constantly come across people saying, oh, that's the kid show. No, it's not a kid show. But it's got kids in it. What? Where do you start?
It's difficult, isn't it? It can even, it comes back to that issue like I think some people had with Phantom Menace. You follow around a child, and I think everybody wasn't expecting to be meeting like Anakin at such a young age, when actually it kind of makes perfect sense. Sometimes word of mouth, and the thing is with streaming, these days, it will live on Disney Plus for as long as obviously they want it to, and I don't foresee them actually removing it like they did say like Willow, for example. There is always a hope that maybe it gains traction once seasons out, and maybe there's just general interest in that, maybe kind of peaks again with Star Wars. It might kind of get a slight boost in the numbers and stuff. Because you never know, how these things are. I do it all the time. People say, oh, you need to watch this show, and then I don't watch it for like 2 or 3 years, and then you're going to go, oh my God, why didn't I watch this earlier?
Yeah. Why was I sleeping on this?
Exactly. So maybe it's that. It'll be interesting to see what happens, because I don't necessarily think that really the series put too many like feet wrong, as it were. I mean, I think maybe it slowed down a little bit with the previous couple of episodes, but then I think it didn't feel like it was filler episodes, and that actually we only needed 6 instead of 8. So it's, I think, like you just need to kind of pace the show out a little bit, just to make sure that when you have a big high moments, they feel like they're really big and important, and really wow. Fingers crossed that it does come back.
Fantha Tracks. Hoodoo!
What will your big takeaway be from this season of Skeleton Crew?
Well, other than Neil in the bath.
Other than Neil in the bath.
I don't know, actually. I mean, contrary to maybe what a lot of people might be necessarily saying just generally online, kind of does give me a little bit of hope about the future of Star Wars. I think there's really good potential. I don't necessarily know if, movie potential right now for like a Skeleton Crew kind of like movie, but there's definitely the groundwork's been laid. If they could find a way to link this more into, say, like the Mandoverse, in a more obvious way or something, that might strengthen it a little bit. We could see AT-AT in Mando versus Grogu. There's no reason now why an M1 starfighter couldn't land there.
My takeaway is two things. One, I think George would have loved this.
I think so.
And also that there feels like there's been a struggle for what's the direction since 2019 when Rise of Skywalker finished, the Skywalker saga's done. We're going to do stuff that's auxiliary to it, like Andor, and stuff that's sequel to it, like the Mando stuff. But it's tricky to find something that's going to be the through line. And maybe with these kids, maybe we've set something off that in 10, 15, 20 years' time, if the actors want to do it or the characters are still around, we could be watching stories where a 30-year-old Wim or a 30-year-old Neil or whatever is in a situation in the forthcoming Rey movie era where they're more senior, they're more tenured, they've been out in the galaxy, who knows what they're doing then. So it feels like it's starting something, not just because they're kids, but it feels like the start of something.
I think it could be. Yeah, you could quite easily see Fern flying around in a YT 1500 or something like that. And, you know, Chancellor Neil of Atakrin or something like that. Only the future will tell us. For now, anyway, I think we're going to park this reaction crew for the time being, but we're going to come back hopefully next week, give the series a bit of thought, give it a bit of like space and distance, and see what else everybody's saying online, see what's going to land and what's not. Talk about more about like what we thought the series is leaving us with in Star Wars universe. So hopefully you'll join us for that, and hopefully if you would like to send us a listener's question, then we can read it out on the main show. So if you'd like to send a listener's question in, please do, and Mr. Newbold can tell you how you can do it.
I certainly can, and here's how you can do it.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's the me done for this season, I think, Mark.
Yes, hopefully this season, but not this series. Yes, we will be back as Star Wars reaction chats for Andor Season 2, which, believe it or not, will be here sooner than later. So if you haven't, highly recommend you get back and you rewatch that series, because I think it's going to be really exciting and you want to come into it fresh, thinking about Andor and blue skinned trunked alien
in the bath.
In the bath. But now, anyway, thank you very much for listening. And of course, just a reminder that we will be back for Andor Season 2, because that will be here with us sooner than later. So make sure you get on to Reaction Chat for that. And also make sure you rewatch the first series, because I think you're going to need it. Stay safe, take care, may the Force be with you. And remember, we all have a place in the great work.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Planet Leia.